Hi, I'm Benabel, and this is one video in the Tinkering Bell series on my channel. In the Tinkering Bell series, I showcase my metaphysical and esoteric tinkerings, a practicum based on my particular idiosyncrasies in the craft.
This is Episode 2, Architecture of Sacred Space, Part 1 of 2. To cover sacred space design, we're going to need 2 videos. Whether you are designing the blueprints for a church or temple, seeking out a home and living quarters that will be empowered as a sacred space, a burial site, or setting up your altar, there are 5 fundamental principles for designing sacred space. Yes, of course, you can intuit your way by sensing out what works and doesn't work, or you can utilize the metaphysical sciences to help you perfect your craft. Let's begin with an overview of the 5 principles we'll be covering over the span of 2 videos. These are the fundamental criteria I personally consider to ensure a sanctified living space, and that criteria comes from observation of sacred sites across many world religions and civilizations. While the bells and whistles will differ, interestingly, this common denominator of 5 principles remains the same. First, we consider harmonic resonance. That's what episode 2 will focus on. Second, we consider magnetism. We'll get to that in episode 3. Third, we look at the orientation of the site. Fourth, we have to account for water in some way. And finally, the 5th principle, anchoring. Now let's discuss harmonic resonance. Harmonic refers to an integer or whole number multiplied by a vibrating object's fundamental frequency. The fundamental frequency is the lowest resonant frequency of that vibrating object. Resonance is when a vibrating object oscillates at a harmonic with an amplitude that's larger than other frequencies. Musicians understand harmonic resonance intuitively because you need to know harmonic resonance to tune your instrument. How do you tune a violin string? Well, you start with the A string, use a tuning fork at exactly 440 Hertz that, when struck, plays a perfect pitched A. You then tune the A string, adjusting it until it resonates with that perfect pitched 440 A. You then adjust the pegs up or down, positive or negative in science speak, until 2 systems, the tuning fork and your violin string, hit equilibrium or is perfectly tuned. And how do you know when your instrument is perfectly tuned? Violinists will tell you there's this amplified oomph they can just sense, an extra inexplicable ringing that only happens when your string is perfectly pitched. That's the harmonic resonance a violinist with no scientific knowledge can just intuit by that amplified oomph. But now you know the science. There's totally something sciencey to that intuitive amplified oomph. Harmonic resonance is when 2 independent systems are set into vibrational motion, and one system's natural frequency induces the second system into vibrational motion. You definitely want that effect from your sacred space. You want space that puts you in resonance with the earth around you and with the heavens. Harmonic resonance is found in many areas of life. You'll find it in gravitational orbits of the universe, electromagnetic oscillations, music and acoustical vibrations of objects in any state, solids, liquids, or gases, and even the harmonic resonance of light and sound. A basic characteristic of harmonic resonance, common in any setting that it is found, is the oscillation at a signature frequency. Amplified harmonics are integer multiples of the vibrating object's fundamental frequency. Sidebar: in Eastern esoteric traditions, recitations of mantras and sutras have long been used on the fundamental belief of harmonic resonance. Certain sounds resonate with certain vibrational frequencies of deity. Okay, back to harmonic resonance. Another fundamental characteristic is any system with harmonic resonance will restore itself back to its own state of equilibrium if and when you deflect that system from its resting state. Huh? Okay. A swinging pendulum, for example, illustrates this characteristic of harmonic resonance. The swinging pendulum is called a simple harmonic resonance or simple harmonic motion. When the pendulum swings too far to one side, it'll revert back to the center point, the equilibrium. When it swings too far to the other side, again, it will revert back to that center point, the equilibrium. What does that have to do with sacred space? Sacred space resonates at a sinusoidal oscillation that will always bring the state of that space back to its equilibrium, back to the resting state of God. More on God and math later. At this point, that's what you need to know about harmonic motion and how to calibrate space so it attunes to God. Simple harmonic motion can be characterized mathematically as a sinusoidal oscillation or a sine wave. A sinusoid or sine wave is a mathematical curve depicting a repetitive oscillation. Now, what's unique about the sinusoid is it's the only periodic wave that retains its own wave shape when added to another sinusoidal oscillation. That's some deep stuff if you think too hard about it. And it explains communion between you and deity. Speaking of deity, communion is the sine wave, and deity itself can be expressed in mathematics by the perfect unit circle. The unit circle is a circle with a radius of 1, the philosophical monad, which now bleeds a bit into cosmogenesis and creation theory. The monad is the one divinity, the Holy Spirit, the totality of all beings, the collective consciousness, Akashic records, an indivisible origin, at least according to Pythagoras. And back to the unit circle. If you remember high school trigonometry, a unit circle can be expressed as a sine wave. The sine function of angle theta may be defined on a unit circle by an xy point, and turning positive counterclockwise along the unit circle is the sine wave, which, as you should remember, also constructs triangles that illustrate the periodicity of trigonometric functions. Wake up, don't fall asleep on me. This is really interesting stuff. And yes, it's related to the architecture of sacred space. The unit circle here, metaphysically speaking, represents the collective consciousness, that monad, the universe, the origins of the universe, and, may it please the court, God. The sine wave, which delineates harmonic resonance, is an expression of the unit circle, the monad. The monad is the one essence, the how and the why. So the architecture and design of your sacred space, whether it's a temple, your home, a burial site, or your altar, should theoretically align with geometric patterns and emit a vibrating frequency that is a sine wave, resonant with the sine wave of the monad, of deity, of the unit circle. Let that sink in while I move on. As you expand on the principle of harmonic resonance, you get into Lissajous figures. Lissajous figures are created by plotting one sine wave x with another sine wave y. Think of the sacred space that you're creating as x, and the sine wave y is the monad or deity. Here's what the metaphysician can take away from the principles of Lissajous figures in resonance theory. The arrangement of masses will create a complex vibrating spring system, and that's what you need to consider in the architecture of your sacred space. The final configuration of the complex vibrating spring system you've created with the arrangement of masses or vibrating objects in your sacred space will either be resonant with God and therefore attuned directly into deity, or it won't. That's why the principle of harmonic resonance is the first basic consideration point when designing sacred space. You want your space to be resonant with deity, with nature, to give you access to the Akasha. Molecular vibrations at the atomic level also operate under the principles of harmonic resonance. The way an electron orbits its atom is based on resonance. Electrons absorb or emit light waves only when the light harmonizes with the electron's own resonant frequency. Resonance explains radio and television signals. It's how you can tune in to a specific station or channel because of resonant frequency. Here's the idea. You've got a specific deity in mind. That deity is a vibrating or oscillating energy form, and you need to strike harmonic resonance with that energy form to connect to that deity, for deity and you within that sacred space to commune. Maybe you've noticed, but life here on Earth is mathematically perfect. There's this incredible, miraculous symmetry and what we call periodicity everywhere in flora and in fauna. Sidebar. Quick tangent on what you just saw on the screen. That, by the way, if you want to call it a magic square, you can. In Western mathematics, it's called the Pascal's triangle because the numbers in the square form a triangle via the sum of the vertical and horizontal numbers, or form a triangular array of binomial coefficients. Oh, but FYI, this so-called Pascal's triangle has existed in Chinese mathematical texts and magical texts since the 10th century. Back to the mathematical perfection of our universe. Not only is there mathematical perfection, but that incredible symmetry and periodicity comes from harmonic resonance, and eerily, a mapping of our universe looks like an atom. A human neuron resembles the geometric pattern of our galaxy, and a map of our brain circuits is like the mapping of the internet. As above, so below, they say, as within, so without. Another sidebar. Maybe our understanding of chemical harmonic resonance will lead to proof of God's existence? Sorry, off topic, back on track. In the architectural design of sacred space, the resulting whole must be greater than the sum of its parts, and that happens through harmonic resonance. Chladni figures also depict harmonic resonance. These figures demonstrate different standing wave patterns where harmonic resonance occurs between two different oscillating systems. In other words, when what you've designed for your space, which is its own oscillating system, resembles one of these Chladni figures, you will have facilitated harmonic resonance or communion with deity, nature, the greater collective, resonance with the monad. That's how physical space becomes sacred space. Whether working with the circular form or quadrilateral form, these Chladni figures give you a few examples of sacred space configurations that will align you with the monad, with deity. Apply Chladni figures to how you arrange objects on your altar, or arrange furniture in each room of your home in alignment with Chladni figures to create sanctified living space and workspace. Did you know the architecture and geometric form of St. Peter's Square at the Vatican is essentially based on one of the Chladni figures? Thus, it strikes harmonic resonance with the monad, or one singular God. Stonehenge is also configured in such a way that, interestingly enough, utilizes set Chladni patterns, again an expression of divinity. The architectural layout of China's Forbidden City, the seat of the emperor, is resonant with set Chladni patterns. By the way, the Forbidden City calls upon another sacred formation that you'll find in Taoism, and that is the Holy Trinity of heaven, man, and earth. There's so much esoteric Taoism embedded into China's most well-known architectural landmarks, it's pretty cool. Here, not only do you see the buildings forming the Trinity of heaven, man, and earth, the Trinity also resembles the Chinese character for king, which is etymologically 3 lines delineating the Holy Trinity, and then a single vertical line connecting those 3 lines to indicate the emperor's status and birthright. By virtue of being emperor, you connect heaven, man, and earth in perfect unity. Which is why so many of China's ancient kings were shamans. Yeah, kind of a conclusory statement, and I won't delve further into that assertion here, but if that notion piques your interest, check out the Tao of Craft. Back to the Chladni patterns. Right, lots of sacred sanctified sites around the world across civilizations seem to be intuitively aligned with geometric formations that strike harmonic resonance. How does that help you specifically? Well, here's how it helped me. The central architecture of my home, for instance, aligns with one of the Chladni patterns. This was something I thought about and knew I wanted to account for so that my home would have that harmonic resonance and every part of the home would feel like sacred space. It's also based on the configuration of the Bagua, or 8 trigrams, essentially a form of sacred geometry in the Eastern tradition. You'll also find the spiral sequence from sacred geometry forming the central core of my home. I believe paying attention to the harmonic resonance of a home is beyond just feng shui, what can really help a practitioner of metaphysical or occult craft level up and just effortlessly add more power to your craft. So do consider harmonic resonance in all that you do as an occult practitioner. A working knowledge of Chladni patterns and purposefully seeking to establish resonance with your sacred space, or even just your personal living space, such as looking for a home, is going to attune your everyday living to beneficent spirit presence. How you arrange sacred relics on your altar when there's harmonic resonance is going to amp up your power in unbelievable, borderline miraculous ways. Continuing our lesson on harmonic resonance, the Lisa Zhu figures lend instruction to you on the pathways of energy that the formation of physical landmarks in your sacred space should create. For example, placement of furniture around a room at certain points so energy travels around that room in pathways corresponding with one of the Lisa Zhu figures will create harmonic resonance. Or setting up an altar in a way where objects are anchored at certain points so that altogether the final geometric formation of points when you connect the dots will create the pathways of a Lisa Zhu figure. Just an FYI, this particular setup of sacred space is intended to charge and empower my Jiao Bei red moon blocks, which are divination tools. The Lisa Zhu figure invoked here creates a sanctified force field, or so goes my hypothesis. Whatevs. By the way, more on anchoring in part 2 when we continue the discussion of sacred space. Anchoring is another one of the 5 fundamental principles. For those who read tarot cards, a tarot reading itself, as you set down the cards, is creating sacred space. You can further amplify a tarot reading by drawing upon natural powers of alignment that harmonic resonance produces. Must you configure sacred space only to Lisa Zhu figures or Chladni figures? No, silly. These are just a few examples for demonstration. I recall as a musician not really having a clear scientific understanding of how tuning my violin works, but I could tune my violin through intuition. I just had a feeling. I knew exactly when my violin was in tune and when it wasn't, but I couldn't really explain to you how or why. Like I said, I would get an oomphy feeling. And you know what? I believe most of us are the same way when it comes to the arrangement and formation of sacred space. We just know when it's right, when it's in tune, and so there's harmonic resonance, and when it's not quite there. The geometric form of the mandala is another method for establishing harmonic resonance. Look to the mandala for instruction on how to arrange space or approach sacred architecture. Mandalas as artwork adorning a particular space can also work to sanctify that space. We'll get more into adornments for sacred space later in video 2. The Luoshu magic square from Chinese Taoist ontology, a basic magical principle that, at this point in time, has been disseminated far and wide into many mystery traditions around the world, is another instructional map for the architecture of sacred space. The Luoshu, or Luoshu, brings in numerology, astrology, geometry, and we're probably going to revisit the Luoshu magic square again when we talk about orientation, another one of the fundamental principles for sacred space. Remember in episode 1 when I made reference to the sacred implications of the number 15? Note how in the magic square, every triad creates the sum 15. By the way, there are 8 triads that create the sum 15. 8, if you recall, is also a sacred number per the Bagua, 8 trigrams of Chinese cosmology. In Taoist sorcery, sacred space is often structured or designed around the Bagua. You'll find architecture and landscaping all over East Asia based on the Bakwa, or even city planning based on the Luoshu magic square. Western mystery traditions also call upon the formation of 8, reminiscent of the Bakwa. You see that throughout the Greater and Lesser Keys of Solomon, for instance. Pictured here is the circle for operation of the art from the Keys of Solomon. And the funny thing is, if I didn't pay close attention to what's actually inscribed there, I would have presumed this was Taoist magic. You've got the 4 directions invoking the 4 directional deities, and then the casting of a sacred circle with symbolism marking the 8 positions of the Bakwa trigrams. It's kind of nuts. One more example, and I promise you I'm not cherry picking. Well, maybe a little bit, but no, seriously, check out the original texts for yourself. Here is the circle for the Consecration of Pentacles, and again, it calls to mind not just the Bakwa, but operationally, it's in line with Taoist magic and sorcery. Okay, here's a selection of just 2 seals from the keys. The parallels between the Western mystery traditions and the Eastern mystery traditions are pretty incredible. In this seal, not only do you see the configuration of the 8 trigrams, but also the Luoshu magic square. Okay, I am way off topic, but no, maybe not. Sacred space applies to sigil magic too. So even at the micro level of sigil magic, you'd observe the fundamental principles for designing sacred space. Here, even in the sigil, you'd want to account for harmonic resonance. Man, are you taking notes? I'm throwing at you so many neat ideas for your magical crafting and metaphysical tinkerings that at this time, I feel inclined to say you're welcome. Sacred geometry is another point of consideration when calibrating or designing sacred space so that there's harmonic resonance. The concept of sacred geometry itself is rooted in the law of resonance. God, heaven, deity, the collective consciousness can be expressed by a specific sinusoidal waveform. And when we design space here on Earth that is perfectly resonant with that sinusoidal wave, there is resonance, union, and communion between the monad, that unit circle, the God principle, and ourselves. What we need to do is design space that will vibrate at a frequency that is a sinusoidal wave. That is how physical space becomes sanctified. In any form of spell crafting, harmonic resonance is how you tune in to spirit. The design or architecture of your sacred space should, in theory, align with geometric patterns in a way that strikes resonance. There should be harmonic resonance between your man-made architecture and the natural environment around you. There should also be harmonic resonance between your man-made architecture and heaven, or a collective vibrational motion that invokes deity or deity's signature frequency. To strike harmonic resonance, sacred space design will consist of carefully selected iconography, incorporation of numerology, astrology utilizing both color and sound waves to create that resonant frequency, that sine wave, and we'll talk about these various topics separately throughout this Tinkering Bell series. When we say a church is God's house, what exactly do we mean, since according to the same Holy Bible, quote, "The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man," end quote. The colloquial reference to a church being God's house, or even in polytheistic religions, where temples are said to be the residences of specific gods or goddesses, what we mean is the harmonic resonance creates wavelengths that are conducive for particular beneficent or omnipotent spirits to come through and commune with us humans here on Earth. The casting of a magic circle or circle of protection, whether you realize it or not, draws upon a basic Chladni figure known for creating harmonic resonance. Casting sacred space for Taoist sorcery in the Eastern esoteric traditions calls upon the Luoshu magic square, also based on known Chladni figures for harmonic resonance. The Bakwa, expressive of the fundamental building blocks that all of the Chinese Taoist metaphysical concepts are based upon, also strikes harmonic resonance through Chladni patterns. We spent a lot of time discussing harmonic resonance because, in my opinion, it's by far the most important of the 5 fundamental principles for designing sacred space. So, to summarize, your takeaway points on harmonic resonance when designing your sacred space, whether it's the configuration of a church or temple for worship, how you utilize feng shui principles to create a sanctified living space in your own home, setting up an altar, or even how you configure tarot spreads for divination, readings that connect you to deity, the configuration of crystal grids when using such grids in celestial magic, and pretty much any facet of your craft, here's what you'll want to consider. The sinusoidal oscillation of energies created in your space so that it is resonant with the monad, the unit circle. Lisa Zhu figures to cultivate pathways of energy flow that will establish harmonic resonance. Chladni figures for resonant patterns. Inspiration and geometric instructions from the Luoshu magic square. Inspiration and geometric instructions from the mandala. And finally, the principles of sacred geometry. In part 2 of this installment from the Tinkering Bell series, when we complete our discussion on the architecture and design of sacred space, we will cover magnetism, orientation, water, and anchoring. Understanding the fundamental principles of designing sacred space, especially the principle of harmonic resonance, is going to enable you to configure all of your personal space and personal places of worship with such precision that you're going to start feeling a much stronger attunement or connection with deity. Harmonic resonance is about calibrating physical systems here on earth, created by you, man, to align directly with heaven. Heaven, earth, man, by the way, is the Holy Trinity expounded upon in Taoism. It's expressed by the Vesica Pisces, the Triquetra, and in the Taoist pantheon as the 3 pure ones, or Sanqing. And I am so sure in your own tradition or path, there is some expression of that Holy Trinity equivalent to the Taoist alignment of heaven, earth, man that, when aligned in perfection, facilitates transcendence, connection to the Godhead and the triad of deity, whether that is the triple goddess, maiden, mother, and crone, or it is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Got a request for a future episode? Tell me what you'd like to see from the Tinkering Bell series and leave your remarks in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and please help support my work by liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Don't forget to hit that bell icon so you get notifications for all new uploads.